Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro held a high-level meeting with Russian Deputy Prime Minister Yuri Borisov this Tuesday in the framework of the meeting of the Russia-Venezuela High-Level Intergovernmental Commission held in Caracas. The Chilean Parliament is debating a bill promoted by President Sebastián Piñera to postpone the elections scheduled for April 10th and 11th. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa announced a 4-day ban on takeaway alcohol sales over the Easter weekend over fears of a possible third wave of coronavirus infections. From the headquarters of teleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is from the south, I'm Katrina Goss. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro held a high-level meeting with Russian Deputy Prime Minister Yuri Borisov this Tuesday in the framework of the meeting in Caracas of the Russia-Venezuela High-Level Intergovernmental Commission. Speaking following the meeting, President Maduro noted that the governments of Venezuela and Russia are advancing in the construction of their 2021 to 2031 work agenda. He highlighted that this initiative will allow Caracas and Moscow to promote new projects for mutual development and deepen the ties of brotherhood between the two nations. President Maduro thanked his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin for the support provided in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic and the US sanctions against the country, and stressed that Russia plays a fundamental role in the construction of a pluripolar world that challenges US imperialism. Venezuelan and Russian government officials met in Caracas this Tuesday as part of the Russia-Venezuela High-Level Intergovernmental Commission. Venezuelan Economy Minister Tarek El Asami, on meeting with Russian Deputy Prime Minister Yuri Borisov, proposed to continue working on the 2021 to 2031 agenda drawn up in the framework of the Commission, noting it will allow Caracas and Moscow to boost new projects of mutual development and strengthen the relations between the two countries. The Venezuelan minister also stated that Russia plays a fundamental role in building a multipolar world and challenging the United States and its attacks on other nations.
Let us establish what we have called the 2021-2031 agenda, aimed at consolidating the extraordinary efforts achieved so far between our two nations. I am convinced that this session will be very fruitful for the promotion of important projects and programs in each of the areas of cooperation, and that it will allow us to move towards new work strategies and mutual benefit.
And the Venezuelan Minister of Economy also stressed the importance of the High-Level Intergovernmental Commission to promote cooperation between Venezuela and Russia.
This High-Level Intergovernmental Commission, after 15 meetings held since its 4th meeting of co-presidents and as a result of the constant monitoring carried out, has been an essential forum for cooperation for both countries that has allowed us to promote and develop 20 important areas of cooperation to date, including in the financial, energy, technical, military, pharmaceutical, and transport fields, which have been progressively consolidated and strengthened.
The Venezuelan minister also highlighted the support provided by the Russian government to the Venezuelan population in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic on sending the first doses of the Sputnik V vaccine.
Among other areas, the support that Venezuela has received from the government of the Russian Federation has been invaluable, particularly in the current pandemic situation, through the shipment of the first doses of the Sputnik V vaccine, which has been an example not only of the way in which President Putin has handled the health emergency, but also an example of the historic leadership that Russia has had in the international arena, showing its scientific, technological, and humanist capacity to face COVID-19.
Meanwhile, Russian Deputy Prime Minister Yuri Borisov highlighted the 76 years of diplomatic relations between Caracas and Moscow.
We celebrate 76 years of our diplomatic relations, and we have profoundly valued the agreed political dialogue, the friendship, the mutual cooperation between our countries. Our relations mean the improvement of our cooperation in the technical, economic sphere, and other areas.
This Tuesday, Venezuelan Vice President Delcy Rodriguez held a meeting with Spain's State Secretary for Foreign Affairs, Ibero-America and the Caribbean, Cristina Galach. The Spanish diplomat arrived in Venezuela with the purpose of reviewing bilateral relations and recovering cooperation between the two sovereign states. The meeting took place on the occasion of the 176th anniversary of the establishment of the relations between the two countries. During her visit to the country, the Spanish official will focus her agenda on learning about Venezuela's response to the pandemic and supporting the process of national dialogue between the various political forces of the country promoted by President Nicolas Maduro. In Bolivia, far-right organizations that promoted the 2019 coup against the government of Evo Morales have proposed a pact of silence by which they say they will cease to voice their claims of electoral fraud in the October 2019 general elections in return for the current government refraining from prosecutions linked to the coup plotters. Our correspondent Freddie Morales brings us the details.
This is Carlos Mesas, leader of the civic community, the second first in the Congress after losing for more than 20 points in the national elections of October last year. He proposes to stop talking about a coup d'etat.
To overcome the political polarization generated by antagonistic discourses between electoral fraud and coup d'etat, leaving aside all actions of confrontation, judicialization, and persecution that accentuate and potentiate it, and, as consequence of that spirit, and release the political prisoners.
The six-point proposal coincides with that proposed by the Organization of American States, OAS, who played a key role in the coup d'etat, which disqualifies the judiciary from proceeding with any proceedings as long as it is not restructured. In the socialist movement, facts are seen differently.
The responsible for the coup is Luis Almagro, who still leads the Organization of American States. On that day of October 20th, Mr. Carlos de Mesa calls for demonstrations on the media that cannot be covered. Today, everything is recorded, and its military or armed operator was the seditious Camacho from Santa Cruz.
There is a persistent campaign to try to hide that what happened in November 2019 and conceal the fact that it was a coup d'etat, despite the fact that the minimum legal formalities were not kept after the resignation presented under pressure by former President Evo Morales.
They did not install the Congress session to deal with those difficult moments. As they raised the voice of power, they did not assume their responsibility. They just seated and made letters that they reading elsewhere. They did not even went out of a building, and that's proof that it was not a democratic succession. It was a coup d'etat. They used a declaration of the Constitutional Court that it was just a statement, not a sentence. A communication that was based on the Constitution already repealed.
Some media outlets that joined the right-wing forces involved in the coup in this plot do not want to speak of a coup d'etat and are in campaign. They say that a book written by Evo Morales on this experience reveals that he had thought of resigning before the military asked him to, and that proves there was no coup. Another proof, they say, is that Evo's book on the coup d'etat does not mention the word coup d'etat in any of its pages, when the publication points out on the cover once, on the back twice, and more than 100 times inside.
And we'll be right back after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. The Chilean Parliament is debating a bill promoted by President Sebastián Piñera to postpone the elections scheduled for April 10th and 11th. The President is arguing that the vote must be postponed due to the surge in coronavirus cases and should be held instead on May 15th and 16th. Chileans are set to vote for the 155 members of the Constitutional Convention that will draft a new constitution, as well as municipal mayors and regional governors. The Parliamentary Committees on the Constitution, Legislation, Justice and Regulation, together with the Committee on Internal Government, Nationality, Citizenship and Regionalisation, convened special sessions to debate the bill. Meanwhile, opposition sectors have criticised the government for its handling of the pandemic and stressed that it's now being used as an excuse to postpone the important elections. This Tuesday, a United States federal judge sentenced Juan Antonio Hernandez, former Honduran congressman and brother of Honduran President Juan Antonio Hernandez, to life imprisonment for drug trafficking offences. In addition, Judge Kevin Castor of the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of New York ordered Tony Hernandez to return $138.5 million in alleged drug trafficking proceeds. The U.S. government accused Hernandez of being a violent cocaine trafficker of epic proportions who shipped tons of drugs from Honduras with the help of the network built by the state, police, military and corrupt politicians. In Peru this Tuesday will see the second of 3 presidential debates promoted by the National Jury of Elections. The 18 presidential candidates will explain their government proposals to voters over 3 debates featuring 6 candidates in each as the country prepares for the April 11th general elections. Monday saw the first debate during which candidates sparred over vaccines and oxygen as the coronavirus epidemic rages on in the country. The debates have a structure of 5 thematic blocks: measures against the pandemic, education, security, public integrity and the fight against corruption, and the final words of the participants. In Mexico, the Generation Equality Forum, convened by the United Nations Office for Women in Mexico, began sessions on Monday and is due to run through Wednesday. In this context, President Andrés Manuel López Obrador called for a firm strategy to tackle gender-based violence. Our correspondent Eduardo Martinez has the story.
Relatives of victims of femicide gathered in front of the National Palace to demand justice, as they did on March 8th. They projected on the walls of the National Executive Headquarters building the names of thousands of murdered and missing women.
It hurts us to speak about these issues, but it is necessary, because they are killing us.
Yolitzin Martinez has been looking for her sister since 2010. She disappeared in the city of Acapulco, in the southern state of Guerrero. Since then, her tranquility has vanished and she can only regain it, she says, once she finds Yatzil, alive or dead.
We can create these situations in which we can tell ourselves that we are going to protect ourselves from this pandemic. With or without pandemic, we will keep looking. With or without money, we will keep looking. With or without health, we keep looking. With or without safety, we will keep looking. And we won't stop until we find them.
In this context, a forum was opened to address the situation currently faced by women in Mexico and the world. United Nations convened a meeting to discuss the progress made in the Beijing Declaration and
who have been affected by this violence. We are with women of all ages, wherever they are calling for an end to violence.
During the morning conference and remotely, the Executive Secretary of the United Nations Organization, Antonio Guterres, the French President, Emmanuel Macron, and the head of the Mexican Executive, Andrés Manuel López, addressed the forum. The Mexican President took the opportunity to condemn the murder of a Salvadorian migrant woman in the state of Quintana Roo.
It is a fact that fills us with pain, sorrow, and shame to tell their families, to the Salvadoran, Mexican, women of the world, to all men and women, that those responsible will be punished. They are already in the process of being prosecuted and there will be no impunity.
In social networks, the demands for justice for Victoria Salazar were expressed. The violent incident was known in the video submitted by municipal police of Tulum. She entered Mexican territory with a humanitarian visa.
Eduardo Martínez, teleSUR, Ciudad de México.
The Haitian government of President Jovenel Moïse remains committed to a constitutional referendum despite the mass protests against the move. Government advisers argued that a new constitution is needed to balance the different branches and strengthen the state, and called on opposition leaders to prioritise dialogue in the search for a solution to the political crisis. Hundreds of thousands of citizens demonstrated for 2 days in the streets of the country against the new constitution promoted by the government and called for the respect for the 1987 constitution. They also argued that Haiti has much more urgent problems to attend to and reiterated that Moïse's constitutional term in office came to an end in February, which invalidates him from modifying the constitution. And we have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa announced a 4-day ban on takeaway alcohol consumption over the Easter weekend over fears of a possible third wave of coronavirus infections. South Africa, which has recorded over 1.5 million cases, has seen infection rates stabilizing in recent weeks at an average of 1,200 per day.
Given the role of alcohol in fueling, we will put in place some restrictions over the Easter weekend. To this end, the sale of alcohol for off-site consumption will be prohibited this coming Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. So fellow South Africans, this pandemic is still very much with us. We must act with caution not just this coming weekend, but in the days and the weeks and months ahead. We do not know when the virus will be behind us, but we all know what must be done.
German Chancellor Angela Merkel announced that AstraZeneca's coronavirus jabs will only be authorised for general use among the over 60s in response to reports of blood clots among younger recipients of the shots.
I quote the document of the Commission. Based on the currently available but still limited evidence and taking into account the pandemic situation, the Vaccine Commission recommends the use of the AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine for persons aged over 60 years old.
The unprecedented health crisis sparked by the COVID-19 pandemic in Brazil is taking a huge toll on the country's poorest sectors. Our correspondent Brian May brings us more details in the following report.
As new mutations of COVID-19 sweep across the country, causing public hospital system collapse in 16 of 26 states, Brazil is facing its worst sanitary crisis ever. Studies show that the Afro-Brazilian poor are dying at a higher rate than any other social group in the country.
The isolation has been complicated because we see that not everyone in our community respects social distancing, so it's a little scary to leave the house.
In Rio de Janeiro's Maré Favela, neighborhood associations have joined together to guarantee food security for the poorest residents, but things are getting harder since the federal government cut its monthly COVID relief payments by 75% to $150 a month, which is less than $30 US.
The second wave, it came with greater severity, increasing the cases much more. We believe that this new strain has further aggravated the health of people who already have comorbidities. People living on the streets already have diabetes, syphilis, HIVs, and other diseases besides alcohol and drugs, and are even more vulnerable.
As hunger continues to rise in Maré Favela, the demand for food is beginning to outstrip the supply. Brian Mir, teleSUR, São Paulo.
Families of refugees in Pemba, Mozambique are waiting to hear from their relatives living in the northern town of Palma after it was targeted by rebels. Heavily armed militants raided the coastal town last week, killing dozens in days of fighting and forcing thousands to flee by boat and road, including foreign gas workers, in one of Mozambique's bloodiest jihadist assaults. The attack, just 10 kilometers from a major gas plant, brought the militants to the doorstep of the largest foreign direct investment project seen in Africa in recent years. Gunmen killed 3 Afghan women involved in a nationwide polio immunization program on Tuesday, a day after authorities launched a new drive against the crippling disease. According to officials, the 3 women were killed in 2 separate attacks in the eastern city of Jalalabad, where they were on duty going from house to vaccinate children. An official at the Nangarhar provincial governor's office confirmed the incidents. A spokesman for the Ministry of Health said the vaccination drive had been temporarily suspended in the province. Polio has been eradicated across the world apart from Afghanistan and Pakistan. The killing of the polio workers comes after similar attacks on March 2nd, claimed by the militant Islamic State in Iraq and Syria group, left 3 female media workers dead in Jalalabad. And we've come to the end of this news brief, but remember you can find these and many more stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and Telegram. For teleSUR English, I'm Katrina Goss. Thank you for watching.